Do a little every day. And this is based on a concept I have for my show called the Wheel of Momentum.
Hmm.
And it's, if you've ever seen a large engine, they have what's called a flywheel on them, and that's to help keep the momentum of the engine going and things like that. You see them on big old machines. Sometimes they have monstrous flywheels, 20 feet in diameter, things like that. And my advice to folks would be give a little push at minimum, a little push every day. I don't take days off anymore. Sunday, Saturday, during the week, whatever it might be, I don't take a full day off anymore, because if I do, I lose that traction. I lose that momentum. And by giving a little push or a big push or a huge push every single day on my business, on my product, on my show, on whatever it might be, I maintain that, and it gets easier over time.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's built several businesses to 7- and 8-figure companies, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with patents and trademarks. And today we have another great guest on the podcast, Robb Conlon, and I should have pronounced that better, but I feel like I stumbled. But Conlon, is that right?
That's correct. Conlon,
Okay.
yes.
All right. And Robb is, for about 15 years, he worked for somebody else, and he found that what he thought was his dream job about 2014, worked for an Inc. 5000 company, who thought it was going to be great. Company ran out of, or grew the company for a while, then it ran out of track. And within all of that, he decided, hey, I'm going to start to go down the more of an entrepreneurial journey. So he went and worked for a small company, worked for a subtotal of 90 days, after which he decided, why don't I do something for myself? So with that much of an intro, Robb, and I'm sure you'll give us a lot more detail, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much, Devin. It's great to be here, and describing this journey is actually something I've wanted to do for a long time, because it's sort of the earlier part. You get sometimes, I'm sure you have guests who have the later part, like, yeah, 20 years ago I did this, but a lot of this is really recent for me. So I think that's going to really be something that a lot of folks will probably like to pick up on, because you too can start to be an entrepreneur, honestly.
No, absolutely. And I think for everybody, it's always interesting, when you finally step back and say, think about what is actually, how you actually got to where you're at today with your business and with your startup and doing the things you're doing. It's often a good point of reflection that you never really sit back and say, how did I get here and why am I at, why do I care about this and why did I decide to come here? So it's always kind of a fun discussion. So with that, let's go back to the beginning of your journey and kind of tell us, kind of you worked for 15 years for someone else, what that was, and kind of start from that point.
Sure. Well, got out of high school, got, into college, got college job. It's in corporate America. It was great. I met a lot of wonderful people there. I'm still in touch with a bunch of those people. A lot of them are still remain my friends to this day. Nothing to knock about corporate America. Learned a lot there. Spent about 10 years in various jobs that would be described as big box retail or boutique retail, which was actually a really interesting transition, but that's not what the show is about. The next step from that was, I said, God, I'm sick of working these garbage hours for really not a lot of pay. Let's try to do something else. And I did, and it fell flat in its face. I started working for the baseball team here in Milwaukee, the Brewers, and that lasted 90 days. Now, this is not the first time in my entrepreneurial journey that something will last 90 days. That I bit off more than I could chew as a young person. I was like 25 and really like, yeah, I can do this. No, you're a moron at 25 sometimes. So that fell flat on its face, and it led to the first stint I had of being unemployed. And this was in the depths of the Great Recession. And that really was a terrible thing. I was newly married, and you want to put your marriage through a test, be unemployed within the first 3 months. That'll just get you going.
Thankfully, I never had to go through that. I can imagine first of all, being newlywed period is always stressful because you're putting two different lifestyles and different families and everything else together. And, your in-laws and their in-laws, and then put on that unemployment, kudos to you. So,
And somehow we made it. You know how you made you married the right person when you can make it through something as challenging as that. So flash forward a little bit, had a job hunting experience where I actually had to give of myself before I got a job. I had to volunteer with a local nonprofit. And that got me my next gig, which is great. Learned a ton about that, and then learned that I didn't want to work in nonprofit because there was no money in it at the base level. You had to climb the chain.
Mm.
So left that and really was again job hunting, and literally stumbled upon. People would ask me years later, Rob, how'd you find out about this great company here? And I said, dumb luck. I got really mad one night and filled out several applications, and this is the one that responded to me. So it wound up being an Inc. 5000 company. Really, really great company. Awesome culture. I was employee number 38. And I thought, I literally used to say, I'm going to retire from this company to people. And that was 2014 to 2019. And in my time there, did a lot of really great things. I've got awards that are, in my pocket and things like that. Built a team from 11 people all the way up to 140. It really was a fantastic journey. And the interesting thing was there was a toolbox that I kind of assembled myself of people and skills during that time, which came in so handy a little bit further down the road, much like that first 90-day unemployment thing, which is where I want to kind of go next. Eventually, as you said, Devin, the track at that company ran out. It was kind of the company was going a bit of a different direction. And I was maybe, I don't want to say old guard, because I like to be very flexible with, learning and growing and things like that. But the company was moving a different direction, and they had replaced most of my functionality with other people who were honestly, A, they're great people, and B, they're just better at it than me. I'm a fairly a jack of all trades kind of guy. And I happened to hire people who were masters of those aspects that I needed their skill set for. And that was cool until I came back and said, hey, I can help. And like, no, you can't. So to their credit, again, so I left that company after literally 5 years to the day. And to their credit, they made it really easy for me to kind of go off and say, I'm going to do my own thing. They set me up to, bridge the gap, we'll say, between working and finding the next opportunity. So I was really, really pleased.
One thing I think is, and just
go ahead.
Kind of what you reflected, it's interesting. So I like to read, and my wife always kind of makes fun of me. So most of the time, my life was startups and small business, both my own and working with others. And then most of the time when people ask me, what do I like to do? And it's a hobby or in my free time, I like to say, do startups. So, but and with that vein, I like to read a lot of books, and it's kind of how a lot, I don't like to read a lot of fiction books or just kind of fanciful. I'm not a huge Harry Potter reader or something like that, but I do like to read business books. And one of the ones I read was on the starting of Netflix, and it's called That Will Never Work. And I mentioned a couple of episodes, but one of the things they talked about was you had Mark Randolph, which was the original founder and CEO of Netflix, well before you have who you have today with Hastings. And he was talking, and one thing that he found is, you kind of have different people for different stages of a company, right? And you mentioned kind of jack of all trades, and startup, small business, you start get going, your smaller business, you tend to need those jack of all trades and somebody that can do a lot of things. And even if they're not expert at any of them, they can get them done reasonably well over, different, or wearing different hats.
Bingo.
Then as you get going farther in the company as it grows, then you need more specialists, right? You need less of the jack of all trades and something that somebody can do things very well and very specific and tailored. So kind of with that, that's where I think that kind of almost reflected, you said, hey, I was kind of a jack of all trades. And then they brought in people that could do something very well in, very specific and tailored. So then you transition out. So anyway, just kind of thought it was an interesting kind of corollary there.
Well, it is. And the really funny part is that I hired all the specialists and then they replaced me, and there was even a point in time where things had gotten inverted at that company where they became my bosses. I'm like, I hired 3 out of 4 of you here, but
how did this happen? So
yeah, how did this? Seriously, though, really weird interviewing with people who you've interviewed before. But anyway,
so you made that, you said, okay, now I'm the jack of all trades. I'm not the specialist. I'm going to go start more of an entrepreneur journey. So maybe picking up from there.
Right, exactly. And that's what I did. So I said, oh my gosh, I have this idea for a job board, because I really remembered back in the day when I had no job that I really wish there was something that could be a specialized job board for me. And I had this idea for about 3 weeks until I got another position, and it fell flat. And it taught me little bits, and it taught me that starting something up was a lot harder than I thought it was. I thought, people really like, oh yeah, I founded a company. Yeah, that takes a lot of work. And so this other project, it's still in existence. I'm not going to talk about it much more than in the vagueness here. I think I have a web domain and a really crummy site and a couple other things.
Now you have to at least let us know what the web domain is.
Oh,
What's the web domain?
no, I'm not going to, because you guys are going to go at it. It is a pile of sticks. It probably looks better than this website. It really is.
So can I press you to give me? Now I'm more curious to see what it is now that you've given it. So,
all right. Well, actually, I don't know if the domain's active anymore. No, it would be.
let's just do this real time. What's the domain?
Domain is guncareers.com.
All right.
I came from the firearms industry, and
guncareers.com. I'm going to pull it up.
And it's probably, I haven't touched that in.
It is still active. It does have something there. Pull something up. I don't know how well it is. All right. So now that we've made that aside, Nate, you just mentioned it, and then you described it as a bundle of six, and I had to check. So continue on.
It's pretty pathetic, right? It's pretty pathetic. But again, that was the first try. So I got this new job, and I was there for 90 days, and the company that hired me wanted me to be this sales wizard, but they didn't want to spend any money on marketing. So that kind of doesn't work too well. Yes, you can cold call. Yes, you can do all these things. And I said, this isn't for me. So we parted ways. Now, here's the part where it really gets to what we're doing today. And today is, we go back to that thought of joblessness from 2012 and a little bit in early 2019. And I said to myself, God, this is just awful. I really hate looking for a job because it's a problem that doesn't really have an answer. You never get feedback because legal departments at companies are always going, well, no, you can't tell them that because we're going to get sued or whatever it might be, which is not a bad thing. And again, you being who you are, Devin, know why you tell the attorneys tell companies that in that case, because they don't want to get sued. But I made a passing joke to my wife on that, said, man, this is just absolute hell. I hate searching for jobs, and I feel like I never find anything good. I wish there was a resource out there that I could tune into and find some help. And there are resources. You can have a career coach, but you're shelling out cash for that. You can have a professional resume rewrite, shelling out cash for that. You can have a headhunter, and that's another kind of big thing, a couple $1,000s perhaps. And I didn't want to do any of that because as somebody who was still looking for work, we tightened our household budget. So I kicked this idea around in my head of what could I make? And I said, why don't I make a podcast? And I said, oh, okay, everybody's podcasting now, and that's a good thing. But I knew that podcasts don't necessarily make money unless they're connected to something else. So if you look at the big podcast people, Joe Rogan, Michelle Obama, these people who have networks, number one, of people, but they're already kind of successful. So they bring their own audience with them. I said, man, it would be really interesting if I could build an audience and then build a company around it. And I sat on this idea for about 6 months, and it marinated. And what started as a joke eventually turned into the show. And if you look at and rush up to today, it's more popular than I ever thought it would be. We're pushing towards, 4-digit downloads. We're doing all these things. And the part of the journey that I thought was really interesting was I started with a microphone, this headset, and my personal computer. And I went, I got to get more stuff. I got to do more than this because everybody's doing video. Everybody's doing all this stuff. So I, almost out of necessity, sold my services for voiceover. And you mentioned when I first got into this,
we talked about that before we did the show. I'm like, you have a great, some people say you have a great face for radio, which is always an insult.
I get that too.
You have a good, I'm not saying you do, but
no, it's fine.
You do have a great voice for radio. And it's just kind of one of those deep voices that you just always I always picture when I hear the radio ads or the commercials or someone that's doing a show, it's always that kind of that radio voice, which is what we talked about. And I think that there's absolutely, you have that.
Yeah. And I went to school for that. And so it's part natural gift. It's part, learned thing, but I had to actually sell the voice to a gentleman who was helping me with the podcast. He wanted an audiobook read. And the company was founded because he had a company and he wasn't willing to pay me under the table, which is fine and good and legal. And that's the way you're supposed to do things on the up and up. But I couldn't take the X number hundreds of dollars without basically building a company. in this case. So I founded Westport Studios LLC, and the podcast Recruiting Hell became the flagship product of that. So building the actual organization around the show when the
Mm,
show came first was really kind of the challenge. And I wound up with a lot of, I guess, dead ends, if you will, or roadblocks, I should say, not dead ends, because we eventually got over them. But there were a lot of roadblocks of, I loved doing the show, but I still have to do the business part of it. I have to kind of almost make again, back to the jack of all trades thing. I have to be the salesperson. I have to be the marketing person. I have to be the founder, the content creator, the videographer, the everything.
mm,
And it was so difficult to spin it up at first
mm,
because I had accumulated that toolbox of skills from my Inc. 5000 job and things before that. I used to hang out with all the marketing kids, so
mm,
I thought I knew a lot about marketing.
mm.
And compared to somebody who maybe never hung out with a marketing person or anything like that before, I think I know a fair decent amount. But man, it's the old Albert Einstein thing, or was it Einstein? We don't know 1% of anything, or something like that. I mean, it was scratching the surface literally and going, this is so much deeper. Like, what is SEO? What is Google? And building the company into something that's not just the tagline at the end of an episode of the show, Recruiting Hell is a production of Westport Studios. Building that into something that a business owner or a person or an author could go to and say, gosh, I really have something I need an audio book from, or I want to get this sales pamphlet digitized or whatever it might be.
Mm.
Who can I approach? Turning that into a brand that somebody would walk up to and not have it look hinky or hokey or anything like that was a
Mm.
real challenge.
So you did, rewinding just a little bit, and you did,
Sure.
one question I had, and then we'll jump to your normal story.
Yeah.
So you got late year after 90 days, either kind of quit, laid off type of a thing on the job prior to this. What did you do as you were building this, or how did you support yourself? You kind of said, hey, I'd love to, I think podcasting is where I want to start. I'm going to see if I can build a business around that. If it wasn't successful out of the shoot and you didn't have a whole bunch of clients or everything else, how did you support yourself, or how did you get the business up and going?
Good question. And I have to tell you, you say the 90 days parting thing. The afternoon that they let me go, I was literally 3 minutes from actually walking into the CEO's office and saying, man, this isn't working. I'm going to resign. He like beat me to it. I'm like, come
Oh,
on.
I missed my chance to go and say,
But the positive thing about that, and again, as the guy who runs the careers podcast, him letting me go was an unemployment plus, because the business let me go, not me saying I quit, if you will. So that's a good thing. But to get into the building part, you get out of that and you feel this weight kind of get off you when you're coming out of a bad job or something that wasn't good for you.
Hmm.
And I went home, and I'm not gonna lie, I played video games. I played a truckload of video games because it was like a little vacation after this really stressful 90 days. And then I said, yeah, I got to get on the job hunt. But supporting the household here, I've talked to her about her twice or three times already. Delightful wife. She is smart. She is hardworking. She actually works for a law office, and I could not do her job, and I could not be who I am without my other half.
Hmm.
And it's a huge testament to, as I said earlier, picking the right partner. And the poor girl right now, as we're recording this, she's at work, and I know she's been having, because of the COVID and everything like that, it's been packing all the cases together, and she's been just pulling 12-hour days and things like that. And it's just finding somebody who loves you that much to work those hard, long hours while you're picking something up is really, really the big thing. And again, I don't want to say, I went and played a lot of video games right away. Yeah, there was like a week of I took 4 days off. That's cool. But I did get back on the job trail. And it was the little bits of things that I did every day, of just the brainstorming at first over the first few months, going, I should make a podcast. What do I want the podcast to be about? What do I want the format to be about? Do I talk about this? Do I rant about how bad the jobs market is, or things like that? Forming that and putting it into a concrete thing that you can show to somebody. And actually, in the first couple months, I did show it to a very good friend of mine, and he's like, I have no idea what the heck you want to do. And it just shattered my confidence. And I'm like, is this a bad idea? And he goes, I get that you want to talk about jobs, but all it sounds like you want to do is rant and complain. And that, I think, is going to turn people off. And so credit to him and big thanks to him. It sent me back to the drawing board to say that product didn't ring with somebody who at the time he was actually looking for another job. He works logistics for a major retailer, and he doesn't work in the best of environments. I mean, he does heavy work all day long with, he calls them scumbags. They're just not reliable people. They don't show up for work, so he has to do more work. But and he was, again, looking for a job, and he's going, I wouldn't listen to this. And I said, okay. So we go back to the drawing board, and we came to the current incarnation, which again has changed, but also the means to continue to create it as the flagship product of the company. And doing audio for people is kind of a little niche thing. And when you find that niche and get really, really good at it, and I won't say that I'm really good at it, but if I look at the growth I've had over the past year or two in how I mix audio, how I would bring something to life for a client, it's night and day. It's just outstanding. So that's the kind of the reboot that happened early in the journey, if you will.
So now you did all that. So help me understand. And you get the idea. You start the podcast. You say, we're going to make this into a business. So, and now you have to figure out how to actually make money off of it, right? Which is always
right.
Any business has to make money, or you can't live on dreams and wishes forever. And at some point, you have to make money off of it.
You'd be surprised how far dreams and wishes have gotten me so far, man. It's.
But at some point, you have to make money. Even if you're Amazon, at some point, you have to actually turn a profit.
Yes.
So, and there's a few different ways that you can go about a podcast, right? As far as making money. One, it can be, hey, I've got a services. I'm trying to generate, whether it's marketing or income or people knowing, spreading the word and letting people know how great I am in something. And so it's kind of supportive of a different business, right? So it's kind of that marketing branch. You can also do it, as you mentioned, whether it's a, Ben Shapiro or a Hannity or a, Maddows, or if they have podcasts, some of them do and some of them are radio, but same idea. It can be, or advertising, right? They get enough listenership, right, and they do that. How do you do it if, but it sounds like with you, you're saying, hey, I'd like to build this into a concept. So was it, hey, I'm going to provide the services as I build my own podcast so that others can use it? Or maybe what's the plan or already in process of monetizing it or making it into a business?
Sure. The plan that I initially had was, you know what, I'm going to make this show and so many people are going to listen to it. And there's going to be people who are like, I have a company. I should talk to my boss and get this guy to record ads for us and things like that. Well, that was not working, obviously. As I said before, most of the big folks have an audience and they bring that with them. When you're coming from basically being a nobody, and I have a network. I have people that I know from work and that follow me on LinkedIn and things like that. But when you have a network that's not this, juggernaut of influence, it's really hard. So you have to go out, you have to network, you have to find the other people in your space. And that's what I did. I found the other people in my space as a podcaster. And this might actually be regardless of industry. Find the people in your space that can benefit and learn from you. And you also learned from them. So I stumbled upon this community, which I think we'll talk about this for you a little bit later. It's called Podcast Town. And it's basically a forum, if you will, for fledgling podcasters. This is great. And I met a whole bunch of amazing people through there. Some of them have been guests on my show. Some of them have I've consulted for, they've consulted with me. And I started building that little by little off of that. Somebody says, hey, I want a new intro for my podcast. Rob, you do audio. Can you record that for me? Absolutely. How do you want it to sound? The best example I can probably give you, and this is kind of a funny example, is a guy I play a game with. He was going to be on some live streams, and he was going to try something completely new with his play style in the video game. and he wanted something that sounded a lot like the 1995 Chicago Bulls entry for him that would introduce him by his name. And he said, Rob, can you whip this up for me? And I said, okay, how do you want it to sound? He goes, 1995 Bulls with a little bit of pro wrestler mixed in. And I said, okay. So I went to the drawing board. And again, he said, you can make it, it doesn't have to be perfect. It should be great, but not perfect. I said, okay, give me a few days. And it didn't take me long, but I whipped together this thing, sent it back to him that basically is a hype song for him. And he was beyond thrilled. And it's these little bits of kind of almost piecework that have fueled my company. And it's, there's an audiobook that I recorded, full-length audiobook. Like, I've never put out an audio file that long before in all of my broadcasting experiences. That was hard. There were so many cuts and things like that. But it's, now I have something as a portfolio that I can show to somebody and say, hey, are you an author? Are you trying to get on Audible? I've done this before and I can help you. And the other part of that is, the streaming world and things like that. As much as I'm not a huge fan of that, there's a lot of people out there who are willing to pay $50, $100 to get a sort of branded snippet for their video game thing. It's an investment in their brand. And again, tapping into those adjacent industries to audio, which is video and YouTube and all these other things, that's been the main way that I've been growing my business.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Awesome.
You get to see some real characters, that's for sure.
I can only imagine. Sounds like a fun place to go. Well, and there's always so many things I'd love to dive into that I never have time. But as we're starting to wrap up, then I always have 2 questions that I ask towards the end of the podcast. So why don't we jump to those now?
Rock and roll.
So the first question I always ask is, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
Worst business decision I ever made was to purchase t-shirts before I ever had any income stream. It's good to invest in your logo and things like that, but somebody got a little anxious and kind of burned some of the startup cash he had on investing in t-shirts. So I didn't wear one today because look nice for this, but it's they've got the logo on them and things like that. They're very nice, but thankfully they're all gone, which is good. But it's investing in the wrong thing, putting and not being like a penny pincher almost. Be Scrooge, man. When you are in the early phases, the biggest thing you can do is be absolutely horribly stingy with the financial resources you have. And I think that's probably the best way to do it. And there are some times where you need to pivot a little bit and say, yes, this is a worthwhile investment, but then you snap right back to being tight-fisted.
No, and I agree. And I think that there's 2 extremes, right? And you got to kind of find them. In the startup, absolutely, you got to be penny pincher because you only have so much and always have more things to spend on than you have money to spend. When you get to a point, where I found is the hard thing sometimes for startups is eventually, if you are making money, rather than being a penny pincher, not in the sense you don't watch all the money, but you need to reinvest in the business, right? And that's always right. Now the hard thing is you go from, hey, we don't have any money, I've got to pinch every penny and we can't invest you. Hey, we're making some money. Do I hold on to this for dear life and never let it go because I finally made some money? Or do I say, I've got to reinvest in the business to grow? And I think that's always an interesting transition to make as things grow.
Right. And that's actually kind of where I am right now with that, that little balancing act of, if it's like a hose valve, you can't turn it on too much because if you do, your money's gone.
Yep.
But if you don't turn it on a little bit, if I don't put $10 towards Spreaker, who distributes my show this week, it trends downwards.
Exactly. So, all right. So now second question. So now talking to someone that's just getting into startups or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Do a little every day. And this is based on a concept I have for my show called the Wheel of Momentum. And it's, if you've ever seen a large engine, they have what's called a flywheel on them. And that's to help keep the momentum of the engine going and things like that. You see them on big old machines. Sometimes they have monstrous flywheels, 20 feet in diameter, things like that. And my advice to folks would be give a little push at minimum, a little push every day. I don't take days off anymore. Sunday, Saturday, during the week, whatever it might be. I don't take a full day off anymore, because if I do, I lose that traction. I lose that momentum. And by giving a little push or a big push or a huge push every single day on my business, on my product, on my show, on whatever it might be, I maintain that, and it gets easier over time. If I look at what I've done today, right before you and I got on this interview, I put out 4 days worth of micro content through social media, which is derived from my main show. I have done, and that would, in the past, that would have taken me a whole day. It took me like 2 or 3 hours now. And that's the easiness, the efficiencies that you build by continuing to basically practice your business every single day.
No, I think that's a great thing. And even if you're just getting started out, just doing that little bit, if it's a side hustle, if it's something that you're just trying to get going, having that discipline of every day I'm going to do a little bit to move it forward, is at least it gets you started and going. And as you said, almost builds that momentum to where if you never get going, if you don't do something, then you're always going to be thinking, I should do this, or I could have done this, and you never do it. And I think that's a big part of moving that business forward, is just that continual momentum and focus on it. So I think that's a great piece of advice.
Right. And it's almost like working out. It really is. You go for 3 weeks to build the habit, and you have to keep going, because if you take those days off that are not the scheduled days off, you know what I mean? You lose that, and you say, I'll go tomorrow. I'll work on my business tomorrow. And then it dies.
No, absolutely. Well, appreciate, first of all, you coming on. And now, as people want to reach out to you, they want to use your radio voice or your radio face. No, I'm just kidding.
Sure. I'm willing to be on camera too.
They want to use your services. They want to use your radio voice. They want to use your production services, or they just want to find out more about you or otherwise connect up. What's the best way to reach out to you?
Sure. Best way is through website. That's recruitinghell.com, recruiting-hell.com, or westportstudiosllc.com. Recruiting Hell is obviously for the show, Westport Studios for the actual studio. And then, of course, I'm all over the social media world. You can follow us on Instagram. LinkedIn's a big one for me, because my show deals with job hunting and people being out of work as they are with the pandemic and all the crazy stuff going on in the world right now. That's where you'll usually find me, is LinkedIn and Instagram. Again, Robb Conlon, or I believe I'm on there. Yeah, I'm on there as Robb Conlon, not Robert. But send me an invite. Seriously, I would love to put my network to work for you. And the only thing I ask is that when you do send that invite, make sure you put a note. Give me a reason why I should be part of your network and why you should be part of mine.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage everybody to reach out to you, connect up, learn more about Recruiting Hell and Westport Studios. And certainly you have a lot to offer, and appreciate you'll be willing to help others out that are in the job search.
Definitely.
Well, thank you again for coming on. Now, for those of you that are listeners of the podcast, if you have your own journey to tell, we'd always love to hear it. So feel free to apply to be a guest at inventivejourneyguest.com. And if you are a listener, make sure to click subscribe so you get notifications of all the new episodes as they come out. And lastly, if you ever need help with patents or trademarks, reach out to us at Miller IP Law. Robb, thank you again. It's been a pleasure to come on, and good luck with the next leg of your journey.
Thank you, Devin. Really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
All right.